Welcome to this explainer. Today we're tackling one of the most urgent and honestly most fascinating challenges we face right now, rethinking exactly how we grow our global food supply. For decades, we've basically relied on the same specific set of tools to feed the world, but the science is telling us it's time for a massive, systemic upgrade. So we're going to explore an incredibly cool blueprint for transitioning to biodiversity-based farming.
Right, let's just jump straight into it with a huge question. What actually comes after the Green Revolution? Look, we absolutely have to acknowledge the triumphs of the Green Revolution. Starting back in the mid-20th century, it triggered a quantum leap in food production. It literally filled Asia's rice bowls and drove massive strides in poverty alleviation and global food security. But, and this is the big but, as we look across our global agricultural landscapes today, it's clear those wins came with some incredibly heavy, hidden environmental and economic costs. We've degraded the natural resource base, and we've locked ourselves into this massive dependency on synthetic chemicals.
So we're basically standing at a crossroads. On one side, you have the conventional Green Revolution approach. Dynamic, sure, but it's chemical intensive, it degrades resources, and it carries unbelievably high external costs for both human health and the environment. On the other side, though, we have agroecology. And I want to be clear, this isn't some nostalgic return to the old days of farming. It is about applying highly advanced ecological science to design sustainable agriculture. It's totally biodiversity-based. It relies on autonomous, healthy systems that naturally manage pests and weeds, completely cutting out those steep social and ecological costs.
To really wrap our heads around this shift, we're going to channel a seriously brilliant mind from the early 1800s, the German naturalist Alexander von Humboldt. He proposed this beautiful, holistic vision of nature as a living whole. He understood that nature is this massive, interconnected web of life, where flora, fauna, and humans are entirely linked. Fast forward to today, and we're actually using his 200-year-old perspective as the foundational concept for this modern agricultural transition.
Here's how we're going to break this down today. 1. Rethinking the Green Revolution. 2. Discovering nature's pest controllers. 3. Practical protocols for farmers. 4. Delivering knowledge and tools. 5. Measuring socio-ecological outcomes. And 6. Policies for sustainable transitions.
So how do we actually pull this off? Well, we use an evidence-based roadmap known as the 6-step impact pathway for biodiversity-based pest management. It takes us all the way from the abstract concept of biodiversity straight through to concrete socioeconomic outcomes. We start with discovering biodiversity, figuring out its traits, and studying its ecology. But then, and this is absolutely crucial because it's where so much science usually stops, we have to translate all that data into service-providing protocols, build delivery systems to train farmers, and actually measure the outcomes. Section 1. Rethinking the Green Revolution. The hidden costs of chemical dependency.
Let's be real, the economic burden here is just staggering. For example, vegetable growers in Vietnam are spending up to $329 per hectare per crop cycle just on synthetic pesticides alone. Over in Bangladesh, eggplant producers are literally applying 150 to 200 chemical sprays every single year. The toll this takes on human health and the environment is just off the charts. We desperately need a greener trajectory.
Which brings us to Section 2, Discovering Nature's Pest Controllers. These are steps 1 to 3 of our pathway. So the solution actually lies right in front of us, in what we call ecosystem service providers, or ESPs. Basically, they're nature's very own pest control squad. We're talking beneficial insects, parasitoid wasps, predatory mites, microorganisms, all living right there on the farm. In a well-functioning agro-ecosystem, these ESPs act like this highly effective, completely unpaid workforce that regulates pests autonomously. To put that in perspective, in the US alone, this kind of invertebrate biological control is valued at up to $13.6 billion every single year.
But here's the catch. When you map out the scientific research across Asia, a really stark contrast pops up. The science is incredibly robust when it comes to cataloging insects and describing ecology, discovering the biodiversity. But when you look for data on the actual socioeconomic outcomes, it's totally fragmented. It's almost non-existent. We are amazing at discovering biodiversity, but we're consistently dropping the ball when it comes to translating that discovery into practical tools for a farmer standing in a field.
Section 3, Practical Protocols for Farmers. This is step 4, translating science to the field.
So how do we fix that? How do we take a cool scientific observation and turn it into a playbook? We do it through Service Providing Protocols, or SPPs. These are the actual decision-making tools for farmers. An SPP essentially takes functional biodiversity and puts it to work through direct, practical field actions. This isn't theory. We're talking explicit instructions, avoiding certain pesticides, mixing up crop types, adding specific organic matter, or planting flower strips just to provide nectar for those beneficial insects we were just talking about. This is exactly how you harness those ESPs.
Let's look at how this plays out in real life with buckwheat farming. Buckwheat is like the poster child for agroecology. Farmers use crop rotation to naturally break pest cycles. They plant cover crops in green manures to stop erosion and house good microorganisms. They use mulching. They intercrop, which is growing 2 or more crops together to maximize land use. And, this is my favorite part, they leverage something called allelopathy. This is buckwheat's totally natural ability to release biochemicals that literally suppress the weeds growing around it. That is what functional biodiversity looks like when you get your hands dirty.
Moving to Section 4, delivering knowledge and tools. Step 5 of the pathway, bridging the implementation gap. Because having an awesome protocol doesn't mean a thing if the farmer has never heard of it. Remember that gap in the research we talked about? Well, if you look at the literature overall, a whopping 95% of the scientific focus is stuck in the lab, focused entirely on biodiversity discovery and basic ecology. Only about 5% is dedicated to delivery systems, implementation, and outcomes. You literally have predatory mites being discovered in labs, while the local farmers down the road remain completely in the dark about how to use them. The science is stopping way before it reaches the end user. And honestly, this quote from the research just hits the nail on the head. Ecological illiteracy can deepen farmers' pesticide dependency. If we aren't creating farmer-first training modules, clear extension strategies, and systems that respect a farmer's local knowledge, we're kidding ourselves. The transition just won't happen. We have to deliver the knowledge. Section 5. Measuring socio-ecological outcomes. Step 6. Verifiable farm-level impacts. Basically, what happens when we actually get all of this right? Take a second and just let this number sink in. 208 to 315%. Now that is not an environmental metric, that is a purely financial one. It represents the profit jump experienced by Southeast Asian sugarcane farmers who swap standard chemicals for biological control. When you implement biological control correctly, it pays out massive dividends. And the data backs this up across the board. Take cruciferous vegetables, stuff like broccoli and cabbage. Conserving specific wasp species led to a 78% jump in farmer income and saved them up to $513 per hectare on pesticides. In cassava farming, analysis showed that releasing wasps could lead to revenue jumps of up to $1,714 per hectare. And there's that incredible sugarcane stat again, driven by scheduled wasp releases. The takeaway here is huge. Swapping synthetic chemicals for biodiversity isn't just some romantic save-the-earth ideal. It is a highly profitable, verifiable economic upgrade. Section 6. Policies for sustainable transitions. Because now we have to talk about how we scale this up and redesign our global food systems. To kick off what researchers are calling a greener revolution, we need serious policy support. First, we need real farmer-scientist co-innovation. Science can't stay trapped in a silo. It has to be built with the people actually growing the food. Second, we need massive awareness campaigns to tackle that ecological illiteracy. Third, targeted government policies that actively reward agroecological transitions. And finally, we have to start putting a real economic value on ecosystem services at a national level. Like when policymakers realize that conserving just one single bat species is worth $1.2 million annually to Thailand's economy, you better believe regulations will start shifting to protect that biodiversity. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the hidden costs of our current farming baseline down into the dirt to find natural pest controllers, building the roadmap to deliver those tools, and proving the undeniable economic benefits. And it all cycles right back to Alexander von Humboldt's vision. Both the ecology and the economics are telling us that the interconnected web of life is literally the most powerful agricultural tool we have. So I'll leave you with this. Are we finally ready to embrace nature as a living whole to feed our future? Thanks so much for hanging out with me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.